the evening. You can't camp here, sir. Terminal's for passengers only.
Not camping, just waiting on my ride.
With that bedroll, sign right there says no loitering.
And this says I'm eastbound on the midnight coach.
All right?
Bench 14, they told me to wait.
Yeah, copy that.
The body camera flicked on at 11:12 p.m. under cold white lights at a city transit terminal that a black man sat alone on a metal bench near gate 14, hands folded, boots crossed, eyes low that he looked tired. Quiet. Small in a big place. Then a police officer stopped in front of him and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sir, you don't belong here. I need you to get up. Now." The man didn't move. "What are you even doing here?" the officer added, his voice sharp. "This area is for passengers, not loiterers." People slowed down. Phones tilted, the body camera caught it all. What that officer did not know was this. The man on that bench was not lost, that he was not homeless, that he was not powerless. And by the end of that night, that same camera would record the fall of a career, the exposure of a lie, and a truth so heavy it would leave the whole terminal silent. Before we go any further, pause for 1 second. If you believe stories like this matter, hit the subscribe button right now, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what happened next needs to be heard everywhere. "Stand up," the officer said again, one hand resting near his belt. "I'm not asking twice." The man finally looked up. His name was Calvin Reddick. He was 62 years old, dark skin like worn leather, gray in his beard, eyes deep and steady, like he had seen worse than this. "I'm waiting for my bus," Calvin said softly. The officer scoffed. "Yeah, funny. Because you don't look like someone who can afford a ticket." That sentence landed hard. A woman nearby sucked in her breath. A college kid froze mid-step. A janitor leaned on his cart, eyes wide. Calvin stayed seated. "I paid," he said. "Receipts in my coat." The officer laughed. Not kind. Not unsure. More like he had already decided. "Look, man," he said, leaning closer, lowering his voice but not enough. "This isn't a shelter. You can't sleep here. I don't care what story you got." "I'm not sleeping," Calvin said. "Then why are your eyes closed?" "Because I was tired," Calvin answered. The officer shook his head and turned slightly so the camera caught Calvin from above. A power moved. A message. "Sir," he said louder now, "you fit the description of someone we were told to watch for. I need to see some ID." "For what reason?" Calvin asked. The officer's jaw tightened. "For my safety." Calvin Reddick had learned a long time ago when to speak and when to stay still. He had grown up in Marlow Heights, a tight block of brick homes and cracked sidewalks on the south side of Dayton. His father fixed engines, his mother cleaned houses. At 19, Calvin joined the army. At 21, he was in the desert. At 24, he watched his best friend bleed out in the sand while helicopters circled. Too late. He came home with scars no one could see and medals no one asked about. Now, decades later, he wore a thick green coat with a broken zipper, brown boots, scuffed at the toes. A knit cap pulled low. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another older black man trying to stay warm. That's why the officer felt safe talking to him like this. Calvin slowly reached into his coat and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his ID without a word. The officer glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. "Sit tight," he said, already turning away. Minutes passed. 5:10. Calvin stayed still. The officer returned with another cop. Younger. Smirking. "This him?" the younger one asked. "Yeah," the first officer said. "Says he's waiting for a bus." The younger cop looked Calvin up and down. "Sir, when's the last time you bathed?" he asked. A low murmur rolled through the terminal. Calvin's fingers tightened slightly. "That's not relevant," he said. The first officer stepped closer again. "Everything about this is relevant," he said. "You people come in here and think you can just sit wherever you want." There it was. Clear, sharp, recorded. "You people?" Calvin repeated quietly. The officer waved a hand. "Don't start." "I'm asking a question," Calvin said. The younger cop laughed. "Man, don't get smart. You're already pushing it." A woman finally spoke up. "He's not doing anything." The first officer snapped his head toward her. "Ma'am, mind your business." She backed down. Calvin looked around. Eyes met eyes. Most looked away. "Sir," the officer said, voice cold now, "you can leave peacefully or I can escort you out." "I'm not leaving," Calvin said. "Why not?" "Because I have a ticket," Calvin replied. "And I belong here." The officer's face hardened. "Last warning." Calvin exhaled slowly. He reached back into his coat again. The younger cop stiffened. "Hey, watch your hands." Calvin moved carefully and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out. "My bus ticket," he said. The officer snatched it and glanced at it. Then his eyes paused. He looked again. Something changed. Just a crack. "This says VIP boarding," he muttered. Calvin nodded once. "Yeah," he said. The younger cop leaned in. "What's that mean?" Before the first officer could answer, a voice echoed across the terminal. "Cal?" Everyone turned. A tall white man in a dark coat was walking fast toward them, face pale. "Calvin Reddick?" he said louder now. Calvin looked up. "Evening, Tom." Tom swallowed. "What are you doing sitting out here?" he asked, nervous. "We've been looking for you." The first officer frowned. "Sir, this is police business." Tom turned to him slowly. "I don't think you understand," he said. "This man is." But before he could finish, a woman in a sharp gray suit appeared behind him, badge already out. "Officer," she said calmly, "step back." The terminal went silent. The officer blinked. "Who are you?" "Deputy Secretary Elaine Porter," she said. "Department of Transportation." She pointed at Calvin. "And this is Calvin Reddick, Senior Federal Infrastructure Inspector and retired Command Sergeant Major. He's here to review this terminal after multiple safety failures." The younger cop's face drained of color. The first officer laughed weakly. "That's not funny." Elaine didn't smile. "His clearance outranks yours," she said. "And his record puts most men to shame." Tom stepped forward again. "Sir," he said to Calvin, voice shaking, "we're ready whenever you are." Calvin stood up slowly. Every joint cracked. Every eye followed. He looked at the officer. "You told me I didn't belong," Calvin said. "You were wrong." The officer opened his mouth. Nothing came out. People whispered now. Phones were fully raised. The body camera kept rolling. Calvin adjusted his coat. "I've sat in worse places than this," he said quietly. "And I never needed permission." He turned and walked with Elaine and Tom toward the exit. Behind him, the officers stood frozen. Small. Silent. As Calvin passed through the doors, he paused. Didn't turn around. Just said, "Next time you see a man sitting quietly, ask yourself why you're so afraid of him." The doors slid shut, and the camera kept recording. The sliding doors closed behind Calvin Reddick with a soft hiss, but the damage inside the terminal was loud and permanent. The body camera was still rolling. Inside the terminal, time felt frozen. Officer Brent Callis stood stiff, his hand still hovering near his belt like he could rewind the last 20 minutes if he grabbed it hard enough. His partner, Evan Price, kept blinking, eyes darting around as if looking for an exit that wasn't there. People were no longer quiet. "What the hell was that?" someone whispered. "That officer said, 'You people,'" a woman said out loud now. "I heard it." A man near the coffee stand shook his head. "That was dirty." Callis turned slowly, realizing something had shifted. The room no longer belonged to him. He tapped his body cam like it might save him. It wouldn't. Elaine Porter stopped walking and turned back. "Officer Callis," she said calmly, "you're done here." "With all due respect, ma'am," Callis said, forcing a smile, "this was just a misunderstanding." Elaine stared at him. "No," she said. "This was profiling. And it was recorded." She turned to Evan. "You too." Evan swallowed. "We were just following procedure." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Show me the procedure where you mock someone's hygiene." Evan looked down. Silence pressed in. From across the terminal, a man in a dark suit approached fast. He had the walk of someone used to being obeyed. "Elaine," he said. "I just got off the phone." She nodded. "So did I." He glanced at the officers, then back at her. "Internal affairs is on the way." That's when Callis knew. This wasn't going away. Outside, the cold air hit Calvin's face like a slap. He breathed it in deep. Tom walked beside him, still shaken. "I'm sorry," Tom said. "I should have been out there." Calvin shook his head. "You weren't supposed to be." Elaine opened the black SUV door for him. "Sir, if you want, we can file an immediate." Calvin raised a hand. "Let it play out," he said. Elaine hesitated. "They humiliated you." Calvin looked back at the glass doors. "No," he said. "They showed everyone who they were." The SUV pulled away. As it did, Calvin's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Sir, footage already spreading. News vans en route." Calvin closed his eyes. "The video goes live." By morning, the clip was everywhere. Not edited, not blurred, raw. Officer Callis's voice echoed through screens across the country. "You people come in here and think you can just sit wherever you want. People replayed it again and again. His face, his tone, his smirk. Comment sections exploded. Veterans recognized Calvin's posture right away. "That's a soldier," one comment read. "Man sat like he was still on watch," another said. Reporters dug fast. They found Calvin's name. Then his record. Bronze Star. Purple Heart. 30 years of federal service. Oversaw bridge inspections that saved lives. Quietly shut down corrupt contractors. The headlines hit hard. Racial profiling at city terminal. Officer targets federal inspector. By noon, the mayor released a statement. By 1, the police chief did too. By 2, Officer Brent Callis was placed on unpaid leave. Callis sat on his couch, TV flickering. His wife stood by the window, arms crossed. "You told me you were good at your job," she said. "I am," Callis snapped. She turned. "Then why does the whole country hate you right now?" He didn't answer. The TV showed Calvin's face. Calm, dignified, strong. The reporter spoke. "Mr. Reddick declined to press charges for now, but sources say a civil lawsuit is likely." Callis felt sick. Across town, Evan Price sat alone in his car, engine off. He replayed the moment he laughed. It didn't sound small anymore. It sounded cruel. 3 days later, the city held a public hearing. The room was packed. Cameras lined the walls. Calvin walked in wearing a simple navy suit. No medals. No pins. He didn't need them. When he sat down, the room quieted. Officer Callis was called first. He cleared his throat. "I regret my words." Calvin watched him closely. "You regret being caught," a woman in the crowd shouted. Callis flinched. Then Calvin was called. He stood slowly. The chair scraped the floor. He walked to the microphone. Didn't rush. Didn't glare. Just stood. "I've worn uniforms most of my life," Calvin said. "Some were green. Some were blue." He paused. "A uniform is supposed to stand for something," he continued. "But it doesn't make you brave. Or fair. Or right." The room stayed silent. "I didn't ask for special treatment that night," Calvin said. "I asked for the same respect given to everyone else sitting on that bench." He looked straight at Callis. "I stayed calm because I've been trained to," he said. "But no one should need training to survive a bus station." Someone in the back started crying. Calvin stepped away. That was it. The decision came fast. Officer Brent Callis was fired. Not suspended, not transferred. Fired. Evan Price was demoted and required to attend bias training. The city announced a $6.2 million settlement. But Calvin didn't smile. Money wasn't the point. Weeks later, the terminal changed. New signs went up. New training started. New faces watched more carefully. One night, Calvin returned to gate 14. Same bench. Same lights. He sat down. A young black boy sat beside him, swinging his feet. "Mister," the boy said, "are you famous?" Calvin chuckled softly. "No. My mom says you're brave." Calvin looked at him. "Brave is just staying when you want to leave." The boy nodded like that made sense. A bus pulled in. Doors opened. Calvin stood. Before he walked away, he touched the bench once. Like a goodbye. As he stepped onto the bus, Calvin said one last thing to no one in particular. Respect shouldn't depend on surprise. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. And the bench at gate 14 sat empty, but not forgotten. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss the next one. And answer this in the comments. Do you think justice really came fast enough, or only because a camera was watching?